Hi everyone, welcome to Caps 365. I'm Taryn, Bray, joined by Mike Vogel. As always, we are fresh off the Four Nations break, about 9 days off for the Capitals as they had no representation in the tournament. Vogue's just kind of off that. Are you in the camp of it was good to get all these guys some rest?
Yeah, I think so. I think so too. 55 games, and especially let's not forget that the Caps and Toronto had the most back-to-backs,
Yep.
the front half of the season. So they had a pretty rigorous front half, I would say, and I do think that the rest and the schedule that they faced is going to do them good. And I think it's impressive too that they didn't have anyone named to because I mean they're essentially the only team in the league. Seattle initially was one, but they traded for Capo Caco. The thing is, you look at it; they're the best team in the league as far as points percentage. The Capitals are no representation. I mean, to me, that sort of says the team is greater than the sum of its parts in a certain way as well, which I think is something that you aspire to, something that you want your team to. It's a quality that you want your team to have.
As you mentioned, top of the league in terms of point percentages. Trade deadline coming up in the next couple of weeks. In the past, the Capitals have been sellers at the deadline. This year's a little bit different considering how well the team's doing and kind of the makeup of the team. What do you expect the front office to kind of look for in terms of adding pieces to this team to hopefully make a deep playoff run?
Yeah, I don't think that there's a glaring need for anything right now. We've talked about that third line, and for me the Dowd line is the third line, but the Eller line, let's say, that it's been a little bit of a revolving door over the course of the season. But I do think that since Lars has returned to full health, and since Ethan Frank has come up from Hershey, that line's had a little more bite and has had a little more semblance of some cohesiveness. So, I mean, all that considered, I think you're going to see them do their homework, make their calls, see who's out there, see who's available, make sure they don't miss out on anything big that might help them beyond this season.
Yeah.
But honestly, I don't expect a lot of activity. I think if there's anything that they actually do, it'd probably be, a nip here, a tuck there, just sort of around the edges of the roster, or maybe even, fortifying their depth a little bit. We've seen that over the years. I think, you run the risk of two things at this point of the year when you're a team like the Capitals. Yes, you have a great team. You're sitting pretty in the standings and everything, and so these guys have played well enough that if there is a need, I think they've earned the right for management to address that need. But when there aren't any needs, and when the room is as good as this room is, and the guys care about and love each other the way they say they do, and I mean, words are one thing, but you can see it beyond the words too. Then I don't know that they want someone to come in and take one of their brothers out of the lineup and change sort of the whole dynamic. And so I think management is mindful of all of these things, and so these are delicate things to deal with at this time of year. These are good problems to have too, by the way. First world problems for sure.
So 27 games left, as you mentioned. Obviously, all eyes are on Ovi and this record chase, and that is pretty much one of the biggest storylines, obviously, to close out this season. But is there anything else that you are looking for or at specifically with this team to close out this season that you're paying attention to a little bit more?
Just the way the defense is played, you go back to November 9th when Jacob Chikrin came off IR, went into the lineup. We've played 42 games now with these same six defensemen in the lineup. Dylan McElrath got a game in Boston right before the holiday break. But the Caps' record since that night, 27, 7, and 8. It's astounding. And it's more than half a season. That's 42 games. It's just over half a season. They're first in the league in goals against, third in the league in goals scored. This is just over that stretch of time. Third in the league in power play, top 10 in penalty kill. They're everything that you'd want them to be. Now it's a matter of fine-tuning, each individual guy raising his level a little bit, and the collective. So things like looking more connected on the ice, defending and attacking in groups of 5, breaking pucks out, things like that could be a little sharper, that were sharper early in the season. But I think also they might be being a little too hard on themselves with some of these things. Early in the season, I don't think anybody I think teams were taking them a little lightly early in the season. So that's, for me, that led to a little bit of them looking like they were the 1976 Montreal Canadiens or something. I think what we've seen over the full 55 games is more who they actually are, and that's plenty good enough.
Yeah.
That said, yes, there are nights certainly where the look on the ice is maybe a little bit south of the results at the end of the night, and I think they definitely want to have those two things to be a little closer together.
You mentioned consistency, and obviously that's a good problem to have, that this team has, lucked out on the injury front, but there have been, a couple of the scratches who haven't played in a while.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate maybe lighten the load of some players as we get towards the end of the season and maybe getting those guys a game or two, or do you think they really just want to keep plowing through with the guys that have been playing and keep them?
It's a double-edged sword too, Taryn, because you take, those guys, Alex Alexiev, Jake Vrana, Dylan McElrath have been amazingly patient.
Yeah.
They've worked their bags off day in and day out. I think they're ready to go if they're needed. But like you say, obviously that you don't want them to have to jump in and have to play a stretch of 2-3 weeks because somebody gets dinged. You'd obviously I think there's a dozen guys in this team right now that have played all 55 games to this point in the season. Hopefully that continues. You take a guy out, you run the risk of him losing his rhythm. If you just take him out for no good reason, say we're going to get this guy, some games. I think you got to be really careful with that too. It's a delicate ecosystem: a locker room, a lineup, a roster, and I was talking to some guys earlier in the season, and one of them told me like one of the hardest things that the general public maybe doesn't understand is how difficult it is to integrate a new player in your lineup from game 60 to game 82.
Right.
Because everybody has their role and their place in the locker room and on the bench established. You bring in one body and it changes everything. There's a ripple effect, there's a butterfly effect. So you just have to be really careful with all that stuff. And I think you run the same risk if you just take a guy out of. We've seen it. We've seen it here in the past where additions are made at the deadline and it changes the. Yeah. I remember Nick Jensen getting scratched a couple of years ago, just because no performance-based reason, but there was another body. We gotta start rotating some guys. I don't remember them winning the cup that year. They definitely didn't. And there were years before they did win the cup in 2018 too, where it's kind of the same thing. They bring in these guys, and the most egregious example was 2010 when they won the President's Trophy and went out and added 4 players at the deadline. That was just gratuitous and unwise, I think. And I thought it then too, but players were available and they felt like they should fortify their roster and make it as deep as they could. But I think they learned. I think they wound up learning a pretty valuable lesson in the process.